Hey guys, welcome back to Pillbox Movies. I'm Hank, and today we're going to be watching the 1983 dystopian film Born in Flames. This is a film by director Lizzie Borden. Borden's perhaps best known for her films in the 80s about women's issues, particularly women on the fringe, sex workers, minorities, black women. The movie is about women terrorists. We'll see. And yeah, I'm excited to watch it. The movie covers a lot of ground that is specifically, horrifyingly specifically relatable in today's day and age. Issues we face, confronting TERFs, confronting white supremacists, confronting the overall rot capitalism and self-congratulation liberalism has spread on our country and across others as well. It's a damn good watch. So yeah, let's take a look. And before we get started, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more old, obscure, and art house films. Ooh, film validation.
This week in celebration, 10th anniversary of the War of Liberation, remembering the most peaceful revolution the world has known, and to look forward to the future.
A standard intro to a movie, but kind of also, in a way, touching upon the regression to the mean of progression and regression when it comes to politics, civil liberties, that 10 years ago there's this influx of peaceful movement, of peaceful protest and liberation and revolution. And so inevitably, as recent history has taught us, the pushback will be swift, violent, and immensely destructive. Or on the flip side, we may see that this history of a peaceful revolution is an ad campaign. It's marketing. It is the propaganda of victors, and that this is actually touching on an idea of intersectionality, that when a revolution or a civil rights movement occurs, that there's a degree of exclusion or ostracization that occurs with the fringe, with the outsiders, and perhaps this is going to show those fringes, those outsiders, the queer, the black, etc., buffering up against that dominant narrative.
This is Isabel from Radio Ragazza, giving you a little tune that you'll be hearing an awful lot of these days, but you'll be hearing it everywhere.
This is also tying back to an era of pirate radio when radio waves were literally taken over by fringe or outlier groups in order to spread the message.
Adelaide Norris, 24. She seems to be the founder of the Women's Army.
It's kind of a butch.
Homosexual? Yes.
Good, a free radio station. A station not only for the liberation of women, but for the liberation of all, which is found in music. We are all here because we have fought in the wars of liberation. We still see the depression from the oppression that still exists both day and night. Continue to fight, not against the flesh and blood, but against the system that names itself falsely.
The system itself, yeah. There aren't individual actors that are making things personally worse or better. I mean, in very short trips, but really it's an entire system of oppression.
Where the rich get richer, and the poor just wait on their dreams.
It's always like heartening, but also disheartening to watch narratives from 20, 40, 50 years ago and see that these ideas were being developed and challenged and put into practice. And I don't know. America itself has very short attention span, a short memory, and we forget the lessons of our very, very short past.
Labor's abandonment of the old Democratic Party is considered by many the cornerstone of today's liberation. Mayor Zabrinsky combined partying and politicking when he addressed a throng of 150,000 marchers.
There's also an interesting motif. We'll see how it develops across the film, but the idea that like politics narratives are disseminated through the media, and the media that is transporting them, it's McLuhan. It's the medium is the message, but the idea that certain brands of messaging, certain ideologies are disseminated through television, through documentaries, and specifically also through music, as established earlier with Honey and Phoenix Radio, that music is the language of liberation.
As Chief Executive Officer of this great city, I am pleased proud and grateful to you all for affording this city the opportunity to share in that which is the 10th anniversary of the War of Liberation.
Eric Adams.
As being the very first true socialist democracy the world has ever known. All time.
For some reason, America has to be the best at everything.
We have wed democracy with its respect for freedom and individualism.
Good evening. This is Honey, coming directly to you from the Phoenix radio station. And we're going to let you know what's going on, what's happening. Why do they always try to put me down? It's not a peaceful woman.
What kind of train would that be? I don't know. When was the 7 built?
What are you? I mean, man or woman?
Very, very early evidence that transphobia is just a form of misogyny.
Violence flared today in Lower Manhattan as youths in their late
Yeah,
teens and early 20s
it does
threw
remind me a little
Molotov
bit of Brazil.
cocktails in an
I think this is
angry
earlier than Brazil, though.
demonstration outside
But
City
the idea
Hall.
that certain
The demonstration
media
began
types
as a protest against what the young
certify
men call
certain ideologies.
meaningless jobs given to them under the workfare program. They claim that women and other minorities receive preferential treatment in the real job market. However, today's violence began when police tried to remove demonstrators from the mayor's office, and it continued through the morning as angry young men roamed the downtown area, indiscriminately destroying storefronts and cars and attacking passers-by. Police spokesmen denied accusations that they overreacted to the rioters, citing the sympathy many officers feel for the demonstrators' cause. Explosive and dangerous situation as well as could be expected.
Sad to see this stuff of fucking being depicted 40 years ago.
Stressed that he would not tolerate disruptions that threaten the public safety
Okay,
of the
Eric.
city.
Adelaide Norris. Well, you know what a pink slip means. It means that today is your last day. I'm very sorry about it, but that's the way things are. Good luck to you.
We want a J-O-B so we can EAT. We want a J-O-B so we can EAT.
As editors of the Socialist Youth Review, we regret that many of the construction and steel workers laid off in the past few weeks have been the women, hired only last year. The industries have been overburdened recently by the enormous number of minority workers who are applying for a limited number of jobs. We feel that women who immediately cry sexism are being selfish and irresponsible.
Great.
Any move towards separatism.
Great. It's actually a movie about intersectionality. That's really interesting.
The advancement of all parts of society.
We have a right to violence. All oppressed people have a right to violence. And I want to tell you something. It's like the right to pee.
This is gonna like that.
Right place. You gotta have the right time. You gotta have the appropriate situation. And I'm absolutely convinced that this is it.
Get this chain off here. By the time my men call me to no over, I'm going to call the cops.
Call the fucking cops. It's Taylor Sheridan.
The entire organization, which is represented by the circle, is about 1,000 individuals.
I think this is the perfect representation of a certain type of man. We'll just say all men. That he's an expert in his field. He's supposed to be highly intelligent. He's highly observational, studying these women, and he can't draw a circle to save his life.
In this way.
We are here ready to deal with every lie that holds women responsible for rape and prostitution. The lies that hold our sisters of the street responsible for the harassment of all women on the street. The lies that push women into the street as quickly as they force us out of the workplace.
Valerie, our party has decided, and it's an explicit policy, to integrate the individual in society. In that light, we don't have any more use for these antiquated notions of goodness and badness. In other words, there's no such thing, as far as our leaders are concerned, as a bad boy.
I kind of agree. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second. Okay, so like I do actually agree with the head of the rehabilitation center's statement that the process should be about rehabilitation, and it's not black and white. It's not about good and evil or goodness and badness. But this is also like an issue that we see these days, that the language of progressivism, the language of models of rehabilitation or therapy talk and all that stuff is manipulated, is utilized by the people who are already in power and control to silence minorities and to silence women or to silence the disenfranchised when they try and speak out against injustices. And these women aren't necessarily, I don't know, I don't want to put words into these fictional women's mouths, but what they're not necessarily saying that these men are inherently evil or that all men are inherently evil. What they're saying is that they need protections, and what this rehabilitation center is doing is not offering protections. It is taking away, it's stripping away defenses from women, and it's stripping away blockades for these men. And through that, the dominant hierarchy, the dominant force in the society, the men, the misogynists, the patriarchy, the white supremacists get to exert further control using the language of the oppressed to further oppress.
Or to rehabilitate rapists. And they've been cutting back on everything else. Like the victims, women, they receive nothing. They've cut back so substantially that there's very, little left there. They can't service hardly anyone.
Yeah, so the women and the women's services are given no support within this structure. The structure is about rehabilitating the men, about treating the men, about giving them as much facility as possible at the detriment of their actual victims.
Developed the Socialist Youth Review. We have Pat Crosby, hello, Becky Dunlap, and Kathy Larson.
Oh, there's Catherine Bigelow.
Talk about how we still experience rape, how we still experience prostitution in our society.
Well, I think statistics will show you that the percentage of rape and prostitution at this point is significantly lower than it was in the pre-revolutionary society, and that obviously is an advancement.
Well, how are you taking the stats? I guess would be the question.
But that the attitude, the impatience of some young women might be interpreted as counter-revolutionary.
Well, there's two things I think about that.
Oh,
First
wow.
of all, because of the media.
That's a lot. That's definitely an approach.
To identify with these demonstrations has to do with the fact that this group of women have grown up in the last 10 years and
within the revolution.
Have this revolution
they've had too much plenty,
really
I suppose.
I wouldn't care to identify it completely as such, but the situation seems to be a kind of gratuitous desire for excitement and romanticism.
Oh my god, okay.
And because they already live in a structure.
I like that they have the English accent. I'm going to pause for a second. It's like watching, what's that documentary? It's like watching Bloody Town Hall and finding out all of those feminists would eventually become TERFs. I think the movie's pretty prescient in observing ideas of intersectionality that were present in those times, but have kind of metastasized these days. That this line of women panelists, the supposed feminists and whatnot, they can be seen as kind of second wave feminists that were advocating for women's rights to the degree of equality of men, but the kind of projection, the idea of equality with men is having the same positions of power as men, and so the institutions of oppression still remain. You would just have those women take a couple seats from the men, and in a sense their feminism, their women's liberation has become tokenized, has become a tool for the oppressor. As long as they have a few members on their roster that represent this thing, you can't attack them for being anti-feminist or being misogynistic. And the way that they attack the new generation as having too radical ideas or not playing with the institutions enough, or not playing ball enough, or just being bored, I suppose, with their relative state of relaxedness and plenty. That's like literally arguments posed by conservatives these days that progressives are just making up issues to be angry about. And to go back to an earlier point, I do like that this movie is portraying two different types of elders in the movie. That there is value in having an elder activist, an elder lesbian, and elder outsider to discuss these to discuss these issues and to counsel and to advise, because otherwise you run into the same rut of like cycling through the same issues over and over again. We see that these days as well. And so there is a need to include and to take heed from the previous generations and from their battles and from their insights and their acquired wisdom and knowledge, but that there's also these types from the previous generation that become indoctrinated, that become too lulled into the spell of liberalism, of plenty, of just getting enough of the slice of the pie, where they feel like they can complain about others who only get crumbs.
If we support a single demonstration by one pressure group, it's separatist.
I don't understand how you as women can say that women's grievances are separatist. You can't even see how it's affecting you. You know, you're oppressed too, and it's pathetic that you can't even see it. You know, the way my mother brought us up, there were 8 of us, and she...
Yeah, it's a very complicated idea of activism or progressivism that, like, it's about, like, dominance, or it's about consensus, that there's a utilitarian approach to progressivism, that as long as it benefits the most amount of people, then it's the most useful. And by definition, that excludes people that are on the outside, people that are actually the most in need, people that have that suffer the most oppression, that have the most grievance.
If you're not going to write about it, at least come out of class skill.
I don't want to be involved with the Women's Army. It's all talk and no action. We're doing enough in the community by putting out our music.
We have a special announcement from the Women's Army. They're having a mass demonstration in Washington Square Park, and we urge you all to go out and to support this.
And so this is an instance of actually showcasing that that Honey and Phoenix Radio and that the Black activists are more willing to play ball, are more willing to collaborate than Isabel and the white radio show, that despite Radio Ragazza ostensibly having more in common with the Women's Army, that they have more of the same shared values and the same goals, that Isabel's relative position of privilege allows her to say no to groups and allows her to not think that she shares the same values as them, whereas Honey and the Phoenix Radio, who are actually further apart and have different goals and have more intersectional goals, is more willing to broadcast their voice and their message, because
you were the army and the school,
they desire
and
their desired endpoint, their desired end game
is, which would you, and all of you had guns, which would you rather see come through the door? One lion,
is intersectionality,
or 500 mice? And my answer is 500 mice can do a lot of damage and disruption.
Has threatened the city in recent weeks erupted last night as gangs of men, mostly black, roam the streets, breaking windows, looting stores, and attacking passers-by.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how it happens.
Racism, and government officials say the rioters will be severely punished. However, they
what if they were white? It's actually something that the movie has set precedent for. That's brilliant. They've actually set precedents for this, that there was an earlier demonstration of white protesters saying that minorities had taken over their jobs, and while there was shown to be police violence, because police are pigs, relatively they kind of like controlled the crowd, the protesters, let's say, and the news report actually said that the police were sympathetic to their cause. Fast forward to the black protesters, now rioters, and you see extensive violence being carried out by the police. You see increasingly militarized language concerning the rioters, and you see retribution promised at a far greater scale. I know, like, in some ways, movies like this can be seen as black and white, as really stark in their depictions, as really heavy-handed in depicting the difference of treatment between black citizenry and white citizenry, between women and men. All this can seem dystopic to the point of parody, like it's RoboCop, but is it really dystopic? Is it really science fiction if it's reporting on genuine occurrence, if it is showing a statistical truth. I mean, it's really not being that black and white. If we weren't paying attention to it 50 years ago, if we weren't paying attention to it 40 years ago, and we're barely paying attention to it now, it needs to be that obvious. Damn. It's not even like a fictional movie. It's not even a narrative film, because this shit is actually happening. She's thinking, I should bomb those.
Chief, the Norse woman is a problem. She's becoming more and more difficult to keep track of. At the same time, she is increasingly hungry for media attention. She's organized the underground radio, and she's now got international contacts.
Throwing off their veils, thousands of Algerian women poured into the streets to protest the execution of a Polisarian woman,
wow,
by Moroccan
literally happening today.
Control of the western
5 years, whatever. I mean, even blinding someone for 5 years is different to me than shooting them forever. Absolutely. And will turn the people against us. Every time you shoot somebody, be it a man, a woman, or a child, that's being affected, that's causing sorrow. And who do those people look to? They look to the Women's Army. And then in the community can be turned against us.
It's an interesting push and pull in the narrative. I actually don't know where the movie's going to land eventually with this issue of the Women's Army. I have my suspicions. There's an interesting push and pull where the Women's Army originally wasn't supposed to be about militarized conflict. It wasn't supposed to be about prevention through threat of violence. They were supposed to be about community outreach services. Was it with them? It might have been with another group. But anyways, their vision of prevention was riding in bicycles and acting as a deterrence, and not really escalating conflict. And I do understand that perspective. And I do think, like, you know, it's best not to take up arms when you don't have to, obviously, and because you're fighting a far stronger, more vicious, militarized social force. But I think ultimately, in the long term, in the long term, and this is like something that I have my own qualms about, and I'm skittish to even say out loud, but revolutionary movements are not made through peace. Revolutionary movements are staked with blood and with fire and with violence. And demonstration is a powerful tool, but it's not a singular tool. You know, the suffragettes of the 1900s shot at people. Liberation's progress has been achieved through hostility, through force, through bloodshed, and it's really sickening. And you'll gain a lot of public backlash in the short term, but in the long term, it's the things that people are willing to fight for, that people will eventually recognize, that other people will recognize as being invaluable and defensible, and the benchmark of a just society.
Oh, she's asking if you are Zaliwali's friend.
Yes, I am. And could you ask her, does she understand why I'm here to see her?
If you want to help us, you know, you could come all the way to the Sahara and work with the guerrilla, and then you will have much more opportunities to understand our struggle there.
Okay, how does this come? This comes 10 to 12 in a case. How many cases can you get?
It's a weird travel plan. It's kind of like the reverse of the Atlantic slave trade, but the Americans need to get guns from the Saharans, the West Africans, who gain the guns through black markets with, I'm guessing, with the French or with the Arabs, who gain them from the American government.
We should take all the women and make them men, and all the men.
So it's fine for the American military corporations, the American manufacturers to sell guns to people of color across the seas for them to blow each other up, to destroy each other, but they don't want to sell those guns to their own minority citizenry in case they take up arms and rise up against their oppressors. So like stuff like this sickens my, 90s liberal American heart, but measures must be taken.
These women were fighting with the men first, with the men for territory, for things that seemed right at the time. And then after the fight was over, they were pushed back in the kitchens, back in the homes. No. And there's more and more women now that want to change. They want to go for their own. That understand that this fight is not the right fight. And that the world is round and big, and it's our world. And the women can move free in the world. And there's no need for territory. And there's no need to sit in the home and be protected by the men. Dangerous, and there's not that many of you.
You see, the only armed activity we'll have is against the media.
You think maybe the FBI has too much overreach? Would the FBI be able to monitor Adelaide in another country? I'm sure you can find her. She's the only black woman in the airport.
There's nobody here by that name.
Oh, there has to be. We checked with Central Booking. They said she was here.
Lady, I'm telling you, there's no Adelaide Norris here.
So you all right, huh? Cigarette. Yes, it's in the Jackson.
Did they cause her to OD?
Bullshit. Where was her lawyer? How the hell did this
They
happen?
killed her.
She got shuffled around the city. Cops had her. It wasn't our fault.
Founder of the radical lesbian women's army took her own life while awaiting arraignment in the Women's House of Detention.
Did she? There's resources you can read up, or articles you can read up about this, but Eric Adams is refusing to release information on on prisoners who have died with it, and within Rikers. He said that policy of releasing the information to the public, to the press, was established previously by de Blasio and isn't pro forma. Yeah. There's another video I'll link to, I suppose, but apparently the number one cause of deaths in the prison system in the U.S. is suicide, and it's a massive issue. And in New York right now, there are various ways in which this issue is going unaddressed and is being exacerbated by the wardens in the prison system, and especially by Mayor Adams.
Let this thing get glossed over and covered up the way it is. You have to do something.
It is alleged by the government that Norris was involved in arms dealings with the Polisarian rebels sympathetic to her cause. If that was so, why wasn't she allowed a fair trial? Evidence clearly suggests that she was murdered by the police or by government agents operating outside any legal sanction.
We've got to get the story out. We've got to make it clear that she's been murdered. And we've got to cut this cover up. We need people that'll get into a news television center and get a 90-second or 60-second message on.
Yeah, and again, bringing up the idea of the battle of media, who controls the messaging, the narrative posted to the majority of Americans.
Every woman under attack has the right to defend herself. And in situations where we are constant victims of brutality, we must take on the whole armor and defend ourselves. And at this time, we must fight back when and ever we are unjustly attacked. Freedom, you talk about freedom. Freedom, it's yours. It's right here, and it's your right. They may label you, try to classify you, and even call you a crazy bitch. But don't flinch. Just let them. See, continue just as Adelaide Norris. Exercise your rights, and your freedom is yours. It's right here. Black women such as Adelaide Norris may in your community be amongst that minority and be insignificant to many, but just like the fuse that ignites the whole bomb, we are important. Black women, be ready. White women, get ready. Red women, stay ready, for this is our time, and all must realize it.
President Metzger is expected to speak tonight on the much-debated program of wages for housework.
My fellow Americans, good evening.
Is Metzger the name of one of the presidents in either Dark Knight Strikes Back or Watchmen? And Tom Metzger was the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Excuse me, you're supposed to be in here?
Okay, get ready to punch up VTR3 to program.
Zella Wiley here.
All
we interrupt this broadcast to talk to you about the murder of Adelaide Norris by federal agents.
Go right ahead.
But a lot of people don't buy that lie.
Songs in the Key of Life.
She was murdered because she stood against the betrayal of women.
Wake up! We're being murdered out there in the streets.
It's about intersectionality. Even if you have a white woman in dreads, it's about intersectionality. It's about everybody joining together.
Babies and yourself, you're gonna be cleaned out. We ain't gonna be around no more. There ain't gonna be nothing. A wasteland, sister. Now get it together. It's time to fight. This is for all the dead heroes out there. Yeah. It's time to work some voodoo on these motherfucking sisters.
We're called in today to investigate blazes that gutted two female-operated unlicensed radio stations, Phoenix Radio and Radio Ragazza. Possibly related fires may have been the work of vandals. Both stations were known for their radical political broadcasts.
Vandals knew where they were located.
Look at the reality of your lives. We live in a fake socialist state. Why then does the government attack women, putting them out of their jobs and relegating them to secondary positions? They're surrounded by the very images our mothers fought to destroy. Decades of women's work for socialism, for freedom of choice.
Not that this is related, but the hijacking of U-Hauls in order to broadcast the pirate radio stations.
Blacks, Latins.
It was intended for this, but that is a funny, like, I don't know, lesbian semiotics, lesbian iconism, lesbian iconography.
Her murder serves as a warning for women everywhere of the struggle we face.
Oh no!
And the truth will be heard as the story must be.
I made that as a joke earlier. Oh no! I didn't know this was how this movie was going to end.
Sexism, racism, bigotry, nationalism.
Well, what are you going to do?
And the blasphemy of the state-controlled church.
It is a World Trade Center. It is the symbol of American excess and economic dominance. I can understand why Al-Qaeda went after it. In the same way I can understand why the women's army.
Signing off until tomorrow.
But have we gone too far? Is it time to ask if the politics and programs of yesterday's liberation have become the stagnation of today? We cannot ignore the monumental inflation with which we are burdened, nor can we condone the widespread abuse rampant in our social
all of this
programs.
shit is happening right now.
At home,
that
we are
fucking
becoming
sucks.
trapped in bureaucracy.
Oh no. I'm not supposed to laugh, but cool. Amazing. Yeah, a lot of good ideas in this. You should really watch it. It's kind of immensely depressing how many of these social ails and social issues are rearing their heads today. In even further exacerbated, even further nightmarish scenarios. We have all of these. We have issues of women's liberation, of equality, of intersectionality, of race, of police brutality, of corrupt systems, of corrupt prisons, scaled up massively to the degree where we might even just destroy the world with climate change. A massive scale of systemic oppression. This movie presages it all. It wasn't even presaging it. It just reflected on its own times, and by doing so, anticipated much worse times. Love that for us. Yeah, this was great. I'd love to check out Lizzie Borden's other work. I'm sure I can get my hands on Working Girls. That's available in the Criterion Collection. I want to read this to you. Janet Maslin in the New York Times, writing a contemporary review, writing a review of the film at the time, said, "Only those who already share Miss Borden's ideas are apt to find her film persuasive." Oh my god. I suppose that's true. I do wonder if that's a reflection on Janet Maslin's own position. Wow. Janet coming in hot. Ooh. What were some of Janet Maslin's favorite films? This is not to diminish her work. I'm sure it's great. She just happened to bat 0 for 3 on Born in Flames. She loved Titanic. Love that for her. That's also de rigueur of the Times as well. I gotta make sure to show you this article by The Observer, but it's an article about Janet Maslin quitting. And it says, Janet Maslin on November 15th, 2013. I'm sure she's a woman in the red, but it's just clearly a picture of Emma Thompson. She liked Lawrence of Arabia. She liked Taxi Driver. You know, it's not a matter of taste. I'm sure she has good taste. It's a matter of frame, I suppose. Just her good taste is turned on a specific vantage point of films, and that's true of all of us. So, you know, whatever. Just, why would you say that out loud? Anyways, that was Born in Flames. You should really watch it. Find it, take a look. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more old, obscure, and art house films. Intersectionality. Abolish prisons. And until next time, keep watching good movies.